Shalom, friends. Welcome back to Biselleh Torah. Vayichi is the parsha that we're reading this week as we near the end of the book of Bereshit, the end of Genesis. And the way that the Torah is written out, I think, as you will well know, is that from the beginning and to the end, it runs straight through. There are no periods, question marks, commas, exclamation marks. There's no punctuation at all in the Bible at all. So in essence, it starts and it ends. And a lot of the breaks that we make are arbitrary, the way that we understand that the Torah is to be read. In English, it reads in sentences, with punctuation marks, with paragraphs. In the original text in the Torah, is not written that way. So the way that we accent or understand the Bible is the way that we choose to interpret it. And one of the ways that we interpret it is through the niginot, the cantillation marks that give tone and cadence to the text. And the other way that we separate things is by understanding the breaks that the Masoretes inserted into the text long ago, basically breaking down the Torah into weekly readings. And there's an interesting anomaly that happens in these breaks. Sometimes, like this week, it just simply continues on to, apparently, where it left off last week. We left off last week, the very last sentence of the Torah portion last week was Vayeshev Yaakov, and Jacob lived in the land of Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt. And then without missing a beat, without any breaks at all, simply the next words are Vayichi Yaakov, and Jacob lived. And the rabbi's question, why is it that there is no break between last week's Torah portion and this week's Torah portion in the actual text of the Torah itself? And the answer that they give is that they do not want to give the impression that Jacob lived his entire life in Egypt and then was given over to that land, but rather ultimately was returned to Eretz Yisrael. His body was interred in the land of Israel, and that's where he wanted to be buried. While he expired in Egypt, he was a stranger in a strange land. He was a man living in the diaspora. The true reckoning of his life happened with his ultimate return to the land where he was born and where he'd ultimately be buried. The second issue that I want to share with you today is the story that you know. What do you know about your past? You know about what mom or dad said. You probably find yourself quoting your parents or your grandparents and remembering anecdotes that come from way, way long ago. The things that we remember about people's lives that intersected with ours impacted us to such a degree that for the rest of our lives we continue to tell stories and echo the sentiments that they said, maybe perhaps even finding some way, somewhere down the line, way after they've long left this earth, finding that we are saying the same things that they would have said without even quoting them, without even realizing, oh, that's something that Dad would have said. That's something that my mother taught me. The Torah reading this week, as I mentioned earlier, begins with Vayichi Yaakov, and Jacob lived. Notable is that this passage is not about Jacob's life at all, but about his death. And this is not the first time this verbiage has been used in the Bible. Chaye Sarah was the first time we saw it. The life of Sarah, that was the name of the Torah portion, was not about the life of Sarah at all, but about the death of Sarah. And then we found that elsewhere too. In this week's Torah portion, it also appears. Moral? The moral is that when we leave a large footprint in the sands of our life, they're not washed away easily, but they are remembered for many years and decades well beyond our life. In fact, not just the generation that follows ours, but generations and generations yet to come. That those stories, those ideas, those ideals remain, and they're passed down, ripples in a pond that continue to pass forward and backward without end. Moral: we should always choose the right path in life. Make the right decisions as best we can. Say good things, not negative things, and try to inculcate not only in our children and our grandchildren the right thing to do and say, but to do it because it is an emblem of who we are, and ultimately becomes the lasting legacy of our lives. May it be said of us, like in this week's Torah portion, Vayichi, and you lived with such integrity and beauty that the footprints that we've left in this life are not of sand, but of concrete. Shabbat Shalom.